Hey guys, welcome back to our 5th episode of Q&A with D&J.
What's up, guys?
I think you guys are learning a lot. I think we're learning a lot. It's going to be a pretty good process moving forward. We had some pretty good questions today, so let's get into it. We got quite a few to go through. First question comes out from Sam. Best early phase dynamic movements for ACL, 6 to 7 months.
Yep. You just had your ACL tear and recovery, actually a year ago now, right?
Yeah, a little over my year anniversary was a couple weeks ago.
So yeah, we can go over that.
Yeah, I'll start this one off. Sam, so this basically really comes down to where you are within your recovery. A lot of people are going to recover in different ways. You know, if you're, a professional football player, you're at PT 4 days a week and your legs up, there's no swelling, all this stuff. I know who you are, and I know that you're on your feet all the time, and I know you work like 16 hours a day, so I'm pretty sure you're a little bit slower on that, probably going to be a little slower on that recovery curve. But a lot of the stuff, especially as you get into these months where you can start running and jumping a little bit, is going to be very range of motion dependent. And by range of motion dependent, I mean how stable are you in these ranges of motion, right? Because it's very easy to say that someone 6 to 7 months can start jumping, can start landing, can be doing those kind of things to get in preparation to, whether you're going to come back to playing rugby or playing sports. But it really, and I know a lot with me as I was going through this is, some days would be better than others, but if you can't get into the proper range of motion and we can't stabilize there, then it's going to kind of deter and really kind of slow us down from what we actually can do in terms of dynamic movement. So I think making sure that we're going through full range of motion stuff with our strength work, we have good tempo with that, we have good motor competency, and by that I just mean you kind of know where your body is in space through all these positions. You're feeling the right muscles in your split squats, in your lunges, and that kind of stuff before we start going into dynamic movement. If we're already past that and, we can lateral lunge without pain and, we're stabilizing that knee in the way we want, then yeah, we can start introducing bounds and, our lower level plyos. But initially, as we kind of transition from our strength work into that, it's going to be a lot more about landing mechanics and eccentric control, right? So more like our depth jumps, doing some sort of lateral bounds or lateral hops, with sticking the landing and making sure we're absorbing that force properly and we're not dissipating that force all over the place. Our knee isn't shaking all over and wobbling all over the place. We want to be, nice and stuck in that position that we're looking for. Looking for those hips to actually really do a good job of stabilizing your knee, making sure our adductors are working right. So I think with a lot of this stuff, it's going to be person to person, and it's definitely more biomechanic based. I think it's more about biomechanical goals, I think, than just exercise goals.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean all that stuff is 100%. I would just say, you want to look at, dynamic is all going to be relative, and that's kind of like the main thing. It's sort of like you want to get into your plyos and your speed work the same way you would introduce your strength training. It's going to be progressive. So the speed of it should progress very slowly. So like when you said, bounds and hops, like start those hops off kind of on the slower side, very low range of motion, short hops, not very, very high. And then you're slowly progressing into farther, higher, faster, a little bit more, repetitive jumps and stuff like that. And, it's just going to be on whether you're landing right, whether you're controlling eccentric, and then, you can kind of do it as you progress. I don't think I think your point you're making is there isn't really like this book of like, oh, you're at 7 weeks, you're good to do this. Like you're not, you know what I mean? That's not how it works. Yeah. So it's just sort of like how you kind of have to go as your body's really adapting. And like you said, like for somebody who's working all day and not getting enough sleep or whatever, it's going to be a lot harder and it's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
So your progress is going to be a little slower, and you have to just kind of be aware of that.
Yeah, I think we nailed that for you, Sam. If you have more questions, you can obviously reach out to us directly with that. The next question comes from Tim. Tim is someone we've been trying to get in here for a while, so if you're watching this, Tim, come in here, do your squat warm-ups with Dylan, and we'll get you squatting well. But yeah, the question is, best warm-up for squats. So you take this one.
Yeah. I think the more advanced you get, the more you kind of know what you need to do to be ready to squat. I think for most people, you kind of want to look at it a little bit like joint to joint. Like you want to do some kind of motion that's going to make sure that we're getting full range of motion through your hips, I mean, that's going to be one of the main, if your hips are really tight, if we're kind of stuck in extension, we want to make you're not going to be able to get good depth, you're not going to be able to sink into the hole well, you're not going to be able to pull yourself down. So we need to do something where we're keeping a good pelvis position and trying to go through full range of motion with the hips, full hip flexion. And then, for depending on how good your ankle mobility is, like you want to address that some way. I think I like different variations of calf raises and stuff like that. Even just honestly like a 30-second like wall ankle stretch isn't a bad thing for somebody who's kind of has some limitations there right before you squat. Some pails and rails are good too. You definitely obviously want to address your core because like I just said, if we're in that extension position, back arch, we're just not going to be able to, it's not going to feel good. We're not going to be able to get good range of motion. So some kind of, dead bug variation, some isolated goblet. I like goblet isos to focus on pulling yourself under, getting in a good position, activating the same muscles that you're going to be in your squat, and that's going to transfer the best. But yeah, I mean, I like kind of little circuits of activation exercises, and positional work. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that hammers it pretty good.
And not to mention, honestly, just taking your time with your warm-ups, doing a lot of warm-up sets, and maybe starting off with a little bit of tempo and then progressing the speed of it as you go.
Yeah,
a little bit. It's probably
I think especially Tim comes from a health club. I think oftentimes what you see people do in a health club is they'll put the weight on the bar that they're going to do for all their sets.
For your working sets.
Right. So realistically, you should be doing your first set should be. More advanced lifters can probably start a little heavier, but probably somewhere in like the 40% range, and then slowly making your way up to that weight they're going to hit that day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even starting close to 40%. Yeah. So I'm probably getting 8 sets before, or at least 5 before I do my working set usually, and that's a good number. That means you're going to get at least 15, 20 quality reps.
Yeah, where we can focus on
core position, on technique, you're focusing on core position. And then by the time you get to your working sets, you're actually really ready to go from a temperature tissue standpoint, and also just like you've drilled the motion enough that it should be good to go.
Yeah,
we're not just jumping in kind of cold on it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Next question comes from our coach Vinny, and he asks, "How do you deal with tight hamstrings and hip flexors?" So this is kind of buzzwords and a buzz question: tight hamstrings, tight hip flexors, and we could dive down a couple rabbit holes with this. I think I'll kind of start it out and then you can kind of finish it, but without diving too deeply into it, I think a lot of this stuff in terms of tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, or toned hamstrings, toned hip flexors, I think it's all position related, right? So as long as we're addressing, like Dylan was talking about with squats, full range of motion before we're going into dynamic movement or before they're doing any sort of movement out in the weight room, of giving them some sort of context where they're driving their pelvis underneath, they're activating their core to keep their rib cage down, they're keeping that stuff in alignment. If we can train that stuff, that's going to kind of train you out of those tight hamstrings, those tight hip flexors. Because the only reason why we're in that position generally is because we have that anterior pelvic tilt. So we have that anterior pelvic tilt where the hamstrings attach up top. So if we dip forward, those hamstrings are naturally going to feel a little bit lengthened. If we can pull that pelvis into the right position, they'll feel a little bit more comfortable. Same thing with the hip flexors. If we're pulled down like this, they're nice and short. Again, if we can kind of restore that pelvic alignment, then that's going to kind of help go a lot further than stretching hamstrings, stretching hip flexors and whatnot.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with that. I mean, I think that's where a lot of those breathing PRI drills, but I mean even just any kind of like positional breathing drills really do come into play.
Yeah.
If we can get into the right position, own that through some deep core breathing essentially. Yeah. We can calm things down and get yourself kind of set in that neutral position.
Yeah. So
that's where as a warm up, that's kind of what how you want to address it is get to a neutral position, own it, breathe in it. And then, by the time, when we move to our exercises, we should be in a better position. It should be calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of finding that range of motion. So dumbing down the exercise a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe, like you said, doing some ISO goblet squats before we squat. Someone who's in extension, if we can cue them into a better position in a less complex exercise where they can really feel that.
That's where we use a lot of the, heels dug in bridge variations, some of the stuff we kind of adopted from Pat. of just, really finding hamstrings, digging in, owning that plane from the pelvis standpoint.
Yeah.
If we can go through some basic drill exercises there and own it in that, kind of easier position where your back's on the ground, or, we're not dealing with gravity as much, then when we go to that squat, we should be able to transfer it over a lot better. Or whatever, not even squatting, but any kind of movement, whatever.
Something like that that's going to involve, hamstrings and flexors.
Exactly. But the key is that just, you don't need to stretch more if that's what you're worried about. Yeah, we need to do more strengthening in good positions.
Perfect. Next question comes from Sharky, and she asks, what is your suggested workout protein, and what time should you drink it in?
All right.
You want
I'll
start on this
dive in on that. First off, as far as like the type and the brand, like it doesn't really matter. Just make sure it has adequate amount of protein per serving, and it's not obviously the less processed the better. But I mean it's whey. It's gonna be powder.
Yeah.
Whey is gonna be better than like pea protein. But I mean the main thing with like protein shakes is we want it to be supplementation. We don't want it to be a big source of your diet.
Yeah.
So does it really matter what kind you're doing and how much you have? It's going to be easier for a lot of people to get a good source of protein or a good amount of protein, a bolus of protein right after your workout if it's in a shake form. So that's where like the convenience comes into play, and why they're really useful is like we can get make sure we're getting that quickly after your workout so that where absorption is going to be the highest. But the reality of it is it doesn't need to be like right after your workout. Like if you got a meal in, with a good amount of high protein meal in within that hour, you're fine. So if we're struggling with our diet in general and we're not really getting enough protein in our diet, or we're not getting enough other micronutrients, then let's focus on that first and then kind of worry about the protein shake.
Yeah.
But if we are, if we kind of have that stuff in line and we're trying to optimize as far as getting, absorption as quick as possible, blah, blah, blah. I think, as long as it's a whey protein, has enough protein in per serving, then, try to get that in right within an hour of your workout.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing, but.
Let me just ask you another question on top of that, because you mentioned whey a bunch. What if someone has some sort of stomach issue with whey, or maybe they're lactose intolerant or something like that? Do you think it's worth it to go with like an egg white protein, or with a pea protein?
I mean, I think in general you are better off eating food.
Yeah.
Like that's just kind of the main point I was trying to make off the bat. It's like if it's an issue for if it's like hard to like we're having a problem with whey, or then at a certain point it's kind of like, do we need that shake? Like,
yeah.
Because like I don't really love like a pea protein as as a source, like or soy. It's like we think the jury's out on whether that's really a good source. So I think we're better off just trying to plan ahead a little bit, make sure you're bringing something, even some kind of protein bar or something that you can have post workout.
Cool.
But main points: focus on your protein throughout the day. Yeah. Make sure your intake is up to where it's supposed to be first, and through meals, like trying to get as close as we can to 0.7 to a gram per pound is pretty much the agreed upon amount.
Yeah. Sweet. The next question comes from Danny, and he asks, training for a marathon and not changing strength programming as the running builds up. Yeah, I'll start us off here. So obviously training for a marathon is very stressful on the body. The running volumes that are required for most people, generally people are going to be training minimum of 3 days a week for that. They're going to have their long run on the weekends. They'll probably have some sort of speed work during the week, and then probably just getting some quality mileage in, whether it's hill work or something like that. So just in general, like the whole stress of the system there is going to be very, it's going to be up, right? It's going to be very spiked. I think the biggest thing, and we've kind of addressed it before with some of our other distance running questions, are, if you think about the running biomechanics, it's kind of, I don't want to call it lazy, but it's it's not ideal positioning. So I think some of the stuff that you need to be thinking about when you are doing a strength training program is full range of motion stuff, tempo work where we're really feeling those muscles. We don't need to max out. It's not going to be that important.
And you don't need to be doing really like super high volume.
We don't, yeah, and we can probably decrease the volume a little bit. Really, you should be looking at weight training as being your prehab, rehab, injury prevention kind of work when you're training for a running event, right? Like I said, doing a lot of tempo work through full range of motion, split squats, barbell squats, hinging, making sure we're still keeping those hamstrings awake, making sure we can, probably doing a lot of core work and anti-extension work, so we're making sure we're not slipping into that anterior pelvic tilt, which is definitely something that runners get a lot because of that, lazier running position where we're not getting as much hip flexion. We're starting to shift back and kind of pull the ground a little bit when we run. I think that's kind of the main changes that I would make to someone who's maybe starting to train for a marathon, in terms of their overall lifting. In terms of like how many times per week, I don't think that someone that's doing, putting that much stress on their body really needs to be doing more than probably 3 sessions a week.
Yeah,
in the weight room.
3 probably max.
3 max.
I mean,
2 to 3.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is like, it depends how much, like, what do you care about? Because I mean, I think the question seemed like it was sort of like you're trying to still progress with strength.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to be any good at your marathon, then you're not going to progress with strength.
Yeah.
You probably, like, the odds are like you shouldn't be progressing with strength if you're doing a good enough job of pushing.
Yeah.
On the as far as you're building up your capacity there. I mean, probably when you first start to incorporate your running and you're starting to, it's kind of slow, you're not putting in a ton of miles per week, you can probably still keep your volume somewhat on decent, and you can probably push yourself a little bit with intensity. But as the months go and you're actually getting close, like, you shouldn't be able to put in a bunch of lower body volume.
Yeah.
And like and even if you are, it's like you're not. It's going to be really hard to progress, and you just have to like keep that in mind from an intensity standpoint. That like that's not really shouldn't be the focus.
Yeah.
Like if we want to actually do well in the marathon, it's like focus on what's going to help you with that, which is going to be movement.
Yeah.
Full range, right, muscles activating. And having competency as far as the core, like you said, endurance with your core.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a big thing because that's when you fatigue is when we're gonna really struggle with that position. So it's just kind of building some of that up. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect to progress with intensity as you go. So it's just keeping in mind that 3 days of kind of like almost like full body lifting is probably gonna be your best bet.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, you could do some extra like upper body stuff for sure.
Yeah, that's
like,
what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody who really just loves lifting and like wants to like progress on something, yeah, your bench could probably still.
Yeah, we could bench a little bit.
Like your upper body exercises
if you want,
could still be something you kind of shoot for to progress, but I wouldn't expect the big compound lifts to be going up or progressing.
Yeah, I would also think just from an eccentric stress load perspective, talking about plyometrics, or if you're an Olympic weightlifter, it's like those are things that we're probably gonna have to dial back completely, or if not completely, completely pull, just because of the stress that's gonna put on your joints. I mean, you got to think every single contact that you're making when you're out there running on the road or wherever it is that you're running, that's just added stress to, your shins. That's going to lead towards shin splints. It's going to, can aggravate Achilles, can aggravate plantar fasciitis. So there's just so much stuff that stuff is going to aggravate that we don't need to be doing that in the weight room as well. So yeah, keeping it a little bit more simple when it comes to the lower extremity strength lifts, and lowering the intensity, lowering the volume, and probably just doing more tempo work and more general. A lot of single leg work is obviously very important. But yeah, I think we got that one pretty good.
What else we got?
Next up, we got something from Miriam. Your first steps you would take in a weight loss program or to gain weight.
All right. I'll dive in on this. I think I wrote Miriam's first weight gain diet program.
Definitely worked well.
It worked pretty well. She's put on like 25 pounds in the last couple of years. Yeah, I mean, she's had some really good results as far as with just us in general from a strength and size standpoint. And those were goals. Yeah.
Also, just before you go any further, Miriam, thank you for sending us multiple questions every week.
Appreciate it. We need
She's been someone here for the last 5 weeks, so
appreciate
the good questions.
First thing with any whether you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, the first thing is get a grasp of where you are in your diet, and as far as like, what you're actually taking in. So the first step I'm gonna have anybody do is gonna be writing everything they eat down. And does that necessarily need to be like what you're doing for the whole time? Definitely not. Like, and I think a lot of people don't do well with tracking. But to start off, we have to have an idea of where you are. Like, there's no way, how can you progress or go back, or move anywhere with anything if you don't know where you are and start. So that's the first step, and then from there, it's if we're trying to gain weight, a lot of it's just going to be you have to get more calories. Pretty simple, like, and getting your actual macronutrient breakdown is one thing that we can go into detail another time, but that's the first step, is really just seeing where you are, and then just knowing, okay, this is what I do on a daily basis. Like, if I'm trying to lose weight, I probably need to bring something down, and then if I'm trying to gain weight, I probably need to bring something up. If we're trying to for both of them, we want to be getting adequate amounts of protein, so that we can maintain or build muscle mass, because that's going to be kind of we talked about this, kind of one of the main factors as far as metabolism change and just metabolic change in general.
Yeah.
And then the carbs a lot of times are going to be what's kind of like going to fluctuate the most. But either way, it's just find where you are, make sure you're detailed with that with tracking for at least a couple days, and kind of get a sense of what you normally do, and then kind of go from there with it. And I think a lot of times you're going to want to ask a little bit of especially if we're trying to go on that weight loss kind of journey. I think we're gonna want to get some help. The way as far from training standpoint, I think we talked about this too. If we're trying to gain weight, you want to be putting on more volume. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that losing weight and gaining weight, it's sort of a lot of the similar training.
Yeah, similar concepts across the board.
Across the board. Like doing more work, putting in more volume. I would just say that the goal with when you're trying to gain weight is going to be pushing some intensity too, more so than when trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
Starts with just seeing where you're at.
Yeah. Well, I think even just myself, like, I generally eat healthy, and I tell a lot of people this when they're kind of talking about it, and obviously before I send them over to you or Alex just to do the diet consultation, it's just that no one really understands where they're at.
Yeah.
And
it's never what you think it is.
It's usually so far off from what you think it is. And before my wedding, I started tracking. Like, I kind of had like a slow progression of how I was going to do it, because I know myself and I know that I can't be counting my macros every day, every week for 6 months leading up to my wedding. So I had a slow progression to it. And I think it was about 8 weeks out was when I started actually counting my macros, but I slowly started to eliminate certain things that I knew weren't good going into that. And then the second I started tracking, I was like, whoa, like, this is not anywhere where I thought it was. My protein was like through the roof,
and
way
it's
too
funny
much.
Because even you, who like is going to be way more aware than most people, I remember when we first opened this place, we were talking about diet, and I was saying to you, like, you should really track, and you're like, like, I've done that before, I kind of know where I am.
Yeah.
But then you still, like, even somebody who's more aware, like, you really don't know where you are until you're actually looking at it, you're writing it down.
Yeah.
You're like, oh shit, like, I have way more than I thought I did. Like, I am eating way more calories, way more fat. Like, it's just like you don't really know.
But I also think it gives you a little bit more of a concept of what an actual good food is versus bad food.
For sure, yeah.
How many people everybody knows peanut butter is not a good food, but it's like some people are like, oh, peanut butter's good.
I don't think people know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, peanut butter's good. I eat peanut butter every night. It's you just ate 800 calories in one sitting.
And even what you just said, it's like getting out of that mindset a little bit. I know you didn't, but like getting out of the mindset of like good and bad.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum, and like peanut butter in a small portion isn't a bad thing.
No, and you could have peanut butter.
But you have to understand those portions, and like avocado again, it's like not that avocados aren't unhealthy, but they are super caloric. So like we don't want to have like 4 of them.
Yeah.
If we're trying to lose weight, like that's not what we want. So it's just tracking will just give you this mindset of understanding, how to make decisions.
Balance, I think, too, for sure. My computer is restarting, so I don't have the questions, but I think the last question was coming from Heidi.
Yeah.
And it was,
should
we train for high intensity / death all the time, or should we look to have days where we back off a little bit? And so I think we can kind of tag team this one, but I think in general, training high intensity every day is never going to work.
It's never good.
You're just going to drive yourself into the ground. And we find this a lot with, I think, more of the endurance athlete population is that population that really likes to just
they want to
kill themselves all the time. And it's a little bit of maybe that runner's high and that self accomplishment that you feel after, you know, a really hard workout. And they're
and to be successful, like we talked about, you kind of have to learn how to go to dark places in your head. And you know, if you want to be a really good endurance athlete, you're gonna have to learn how to not throw pain away and just push forward.
Exactly.
So they kind of want to get into that mindset as much as possible, but a lot of them just don't realize what the toll they're taking on their performance from just doing that too much.
What that dip does. And I think especially, I mean, and sometimes you hear it with everybody with diet, with exercise, it's, oh, when I was younger I could do this. So it's especially as you get older and, you know, you can push a little harder.
You're not recovering as well.
You're not as recovering as well. You got more stressors throughout your day. It's those recovery days, and you'll see it in like a more seasoned athlete. They'll know when it's time to back off. I need to take the day. I need to recover. I need to take a couple days. You know, and it's if that's happening to you every 3 to 4 weeks or every 2 to 3 weeks, you probably need to figure out what you're doing in your training. It's getting you there every 2 to 3 weeks.
More. I mean, one thing that we talked about a couple weeks ago, we're really drilling about and trying to get into a better mindset with the way we're programming our conditioning and stuff is, you know, Joel Jamieson, he's probably one of the leaders in work on energy systems. You know, he talks about his like, you know, best template that he really likes is really breaking up the week and having, you know, it be a stimulation day, then I forget what he calls it, but essentially like a development day is the next one, where it's like you know, the stimulation day is just kind of getting things going. It's like a moderate volume, moderate intensity. You're still pushing, but it's not like, you know, you're not killing yourself. The development day is where we're trying to reach. You're trying to really go to that dark place, get, you know, push farther than you went before, to a point where, you know, you're really stressing your system so that you have to recover. So then after that, he calls it a rebound day, where that's that recovery day we're talking about, where we're really, you know, you're still going to be moving around, you're still doing something, but it's pretty low intensity so that your body can recharge again, so that we can peak higher on that next development day.
Exactly.
That's the thing that I think people lose sight of, is that recovery day isn't going to take you away from your performance. It can potentially lead you higher the next week or in that month, whatever. You know, we need those days.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, I mean, training day in and day out, high intensity, you may not feel it at the time, but it's just going to have this slow decline with performance, especially with intensity. I think the only people that were ever really able to train 2-3 times a day and at high intensity were the Russians in like the 80s when they were all juicing. So they obviously had a little bit of an answer. If you're taking steroids, maybe this is a whole different conversation. But not that we're saying take steroids, but yeah, I mean, just in general, you need to think about what your body's doing, not just necessarily on that day, and sometimes you just need to get over the fact that every day isn't going to be a day where we really crank and push yourself to the limits. You know, pushing yourself to the limits is obviously necessary, like we said, and you know, even for someone who's not necessarily training for any specific competition, it's good just for that mental drive and whatnot.
Yeah, mental toughness is something you want to develop here. I mean, that's like one of our goals with our clients, is to make them just stronger in life, you know. So like, we have to go to these places where you really, you know, you want to quit but you don't push. You learn how to do that continually, so that anything that we're going, you know, the resistance of life doesn't break you down, you know.
Exactly.
You learn how to push against it. So I mean, I think that's one of our main things. So we think that's important, but you have to have some balance with that.
Have to have some balance and know when to dial back a little bit.
Boom. Episode 5, Q&A
with
E and J. See you next time.
Stay tuned.